Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here. And don't hold it against me that I live in New York City. Okay, we're talking about guns today. We got a lot of guns in New York, and I think the libertarians out there will appreciate that. Many, if not most of the guns in New York are completely unregistered. So, all right. So what we're going to be talking about today is, the state of gun rights in America and what's coming next, and how YAL, pushing constitutional carry is one of the big pillars of YAL's efforts. We're going to talk about that and about how that fits into larger kind of selling people on a larger vision of liberty, maximal individual rights. So let's bring out the panelists now, if they can come out, and then I'm going to introduce them, and we're going to have a rollicking conversation for the next 40 minutes. All right. Okay, this is kind of like the Mount Rushmore of gun activism right now. So first we have Dudley Brown for 30 years. Dudley is the president of the National Association for Gun Rights, and he's represented gun owners in Congress and state capitals around the country, opposing infringements on the Second Amendment and advancing the right to keep and bear arms. Please give a big round of applause for Dudley Brown. Next to him, we have Patrick Neville. He is a Columbine survivor, an Iraq war veteran, and former Republican leader in the Colorado House of Representatives, and now consults around the country. Please give a big hand. And then next to him, we have Garand Thumb, a.k.a. Mike Jones. This is the power of YouTube right here. Mike served 9 years and was medically retired from the military, runs a YouTube channel centered around firearms and Second Amendment content, and lives in the quiet Golden Mountains of Idaho with his wife Ashley, 4 children, and many dogs. Too many to count. So give it up, Mike Jones. And then we have, as the Ringo star of the panel today, Cody Wisniewski is General Counsel and Vice President of the legal FPC Action Foundation, where he works alongside Firearms Policy Coalition to help achieve those organizations' shared mission, a world of maximal human liberty. Let's give it up for both Cody and for maximal human liberty, right? Okay. All right.
Let's go.
Okay, they're coming. It's make the gun printer go burr, not the printing press. Okay, so we're going to start. What I want to do is get a sense for the panel, and we're going to throw this to. I'm going to throw this to Dudley first, but one of the things that's fascinating as we're going into a presidential or a national election season and whatnot, I want to get each guy's sense of gun rights in the country. What's interesting is that about a decade ago, according to Gallup polls, about equal numbers of people in America said gun rights should stay the way they were, or they should be more strict. And then maybe like 10% said they should be loosened, like there should be fewer gun laws. Now what's happened since then is that the number of people in surveys calling for stricter gun control has gone up to a point where it's about 2/3 of the country say they want stricter gun control, 1/3 say they want less. But here's the rub. Here's the rub is that during that same period, and going back 30 years, gun rights have been, generally speaking, massively expanded at the local, at the state level, and more recently at the federal level through a series of Supreme Court rulings. So, Mr. Brown, tell me what's going on? Like, do you think are gun rights in good shape or in bad shape?
Well, I will say first that public opinion doesn't really matter. It doesn't. I mean, screw public opinion. It doesn't really matter that large numbers of people might claim to want more gun control. The simple fact is that all around the country, people are pushing, activists like you are pushing politicians to taking firm stances on the gun issue itself and very specific issues, not just accepting the BS of, I support the Second Amendment, but once you hear that, everything before that means nothing. Everything after the but is where they stand, which is, but I support red flag laws or registration of firearms and all that crap. So the real reason that America right now is advancing on gun issues, and we are, not just from court cases, but in state legislatures around the country, are due to a number of the people in this room. And they are people who went as activists and pushed constitutional carry. My organization has partnered with YAL in many states, including the big win in Texas. And it happened because they didn't let go of the bone. You just pushed and pushed and pushed until they had no choice but to give you your damn legislation or lose their office. And that's the only thing that works in politics.
All right. So, Patrick, can I ask you, Columbine is the paradigmatic school shooting in American culture, and it was a hinge point where the rhetoric and the narrative about why we need to constrain guns, really hit its current moment. And yet, that was also kind of the moment when gun rights started to be expanded. How are you feeling about the state of gun rights now? And I mean, do you see, is it smooth sailing ahead, or what's on the horizon that's worrying you?
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to be smooth sailing ahead, and Columbine was that kind of trigger point. But I think what the difference is since Columbine's happened, you have folks like me that are actually have been victims of these mass tragedies, and we're speaking out. But most of all, it's because the movement itself has actually gotten organized. Mm-hmm. And there's things like this, right? Where Revolution 2023, you guys are getting great training on how to actually go out and be effective. We're not just sitting back and writing another white paper or sitting in our social media channels talking to the same circles. We're actually being effective. And as a politician for 8 years, I can tell you most of the politicians that I served with, their biggest fear was you, and you guys actually being effective.
Hell yeah.
And so I think that's why we see it expanding across the nation, and especially at the state level, because we've gotten effective. We've actually gotten good at executing and not just sitting back and sitting at the philosophical level talking about issues. You guys are actually mobilizing.
All right, so Mike, you shoot a lot of guns off in the woods, right? And you picture it, but you know what Patrick is saying is that it's the action in the legislature or in front of elected officials. But what's your sense of gun rights? And is the day dawning or is the sun setting on this stuff?
First off, gun rights are not in a good place. When the Second Amendment was put into place, it was put in place to check the government, to make sure the government could not become tyrannical. So what at all gives them the right to legislate firearms in any sense?
Amen.
So,
Amen.
So long as the government is legislating firearms and is restricting our rights, we have a problem. So gun rights are doing pretty well. We're getting a lot of our rights back, but it shouldn't be where it is. And until we get all that pulled back, like the fact that we can't have short-barreled rifles without government approval, suppressors.
Yeah.
Come on. It's insane. It's tyrannical and it's insane. And until we repeal that, no, gun rights are not in a good place. So let's fight.
Yeah. There's some red meat.
Cody, you were billed as the negative person on the panel. How do you follow up that? I mean, there's no question that gun rights are in a better place than they were, say, certainly in the 70s or the mid 80s. What do you see going ahead? What are the trouble spots then?
Yeah, thanks for letting the lawyer follow that one up. There's an important point here, and I want to touch on something that you're saying, Nick, and something that Garand said as well. The key here is that gun rights aren't expanding, right? Gun rights are what they are. Your right pre-exists government. It's underlying the Second Amendment. It's not granted by the Second Amendment. And the fact that the courts or the legislature isn't recognizing the expansiveness of your right doesn't affect the scope of that. It just affects how you're able to exercise it and the risk that is associated in your interaction with the state. So gun rights aren't expanding, but we're getting to a point where courts and legislatures are starting to recognize the true expanse of people's ability to possess arms, the right to self-defense, which is the most important right underlying the right to life.
What's up, Cody? Good job, dude.
I guess two things, and I'll throw this out to the panel. How does rising perception of crime, and some of this, I live in New York City. I know people who live in other big cities where, there's a sense that crime is really spiraling upward and out of control. That generally is not statistically true. There are bumps up, but it's still, we live in a far safer country than we used to. But my question is, the perception, as we go into a political season, the perception that crime is rising always gives rise to the idea of we got to stop the guns. Because if we get the guns out of circulation, the crime will come down. By the same token, it creates a groundswell for saying, I know the cops are not going to protect me. I need guns to protect myself. How do you see that kind of dynamic likely to play out in discussions over gun legislation or gun rights?
Well, it's an excuse. It doesn't matter where the crime rates are going up, like in Denver. The Denver metro region is crazy right now. Patrick and I both live close to that in the Front Range, and they've gone through the roof since the whole pandemic. Yep. And the simple fact is, politicians use that excuse no matter what. If the crime rates are going up and there's a school shooting, they use that as an excuse. That's what they did after Newtown. It's what they did after Columbine. It's what they do. It doesn't matter whether it's a Republican administration or a Democrat administration in the White House. They all use it as an excuse to pass bump stock bans. Might I remind everybody here that was a Republican and NRA pushed ban. I don't own a bump stock. I think they're kind of lame. But frankly, you're banning a part. Or forced reset triggers, which we're fighting right now. So using crime, even when crime goes down, they use an excuse.
Then it's like, it's working, let's keep going, right?
They just use it as an excuse.
So they're like real estate agents. If you guys are too young for this, but every real estate agent you meet, when you say, is it a good time to buy?
Yes.
Say it's a great time to buy.
Yeah,
it's always a great time
yeah.
to pay.
And look, now you have a very well-funded left-wing groups in Moms Demand Action. I don't know anybody else here thinks Moms Demand Action sounds like a middle-aged dating site.
Yeah.
But yeah, Brandon stole that from me. But they're now well funded to go and push this, and they don't care what the statistics show on crime. They're going to push it no matter what.
Can I ask the two vets on the panel, how does, we are thankfully, in a profound way, we've de-escalated our foreign policy imprint overseas. We're kind of out of Iraq, we're kind of out of Afghanistan, we're ready to go into a bunch of other places. But we have a lot of veterans who are back, veterans who are pissed off at the government that sent them to places without a mission, without the right support, without direction, and then are kind of treating them poorly when they come back. What is the role of veterans in kind of articulating a strong, robust belief in gun ownership?
Yeah, I would say veterans have a big role, but the problem is we actually have a lot of veterans that come in and do the opposite. And so we need to hold those as the vet community accountable, because I don't know about anyone else who's a veteran in the room, but I took an oath of the Constitution. I took that serious.
Yeah.
I thought I was defending our freedom and whatnot when I was in Iraq, but I wasn't. I was sent there, like you said, on a mission without a mission, and came back with health issues, and I didn't leave my family to come back to a country that's going to start taking away my individual liberties, my family, my 3 daughters' future rights. And so that's part of the reason I got into politics, because I realized the real battle for freedom and liberty was right here, and organizing right here.
Do you have anything to add? Is there a unified voice among vets on this, or are they a particularly powerful force to say, you know what, we know how to handle guns, and we knew how to do it over there, and we know how to do it here. Leave us alone.
I think we've done so much to support our veterans and to put them on a pedestal and to say that they did something amazing. They did. Our veterans, our service members have done amazing things, and I'm very proud of them. But with that comes that responsibility, because then when you have those veterans coming back and using that to advocate for something that they swore an oath to protect, specifically the Constitution, specifically the Second Amendment, it's insane to me that they would even do that. As veterans, as these powerful voices, they should be using this experience, this pedestal they've been put on to advocate for the Second Amendment. They know how important it is. They've seen what's happened in other countries when totalitarian governments have taken away firearms, and it's never a good thing. But I want to go back really quickly to talk about what's happening in the media, because this is something that's really important for all of you, because I don't know if you realize how much they're putting into social engineering and how much that is going to be affecting the public perception of firearms. What you guys are doing right here is so vitally important. You guys need to fight it. You need to be a counter narrative to the narrative that they're putting out, because I guarantee you they're putting millions and millions into these social engineering campaigns to shape how the people are seeing firearms. People see violence on the rise. They see mass shootings on the rise. That is not the case. You guys need to fight this. It is on you. So if there's anything that I can say, we're these old heads right here, right? You are the younger, you are the newest generation. It is on you. So please get out there, do what you're doing right here, and be the best force that you can be for the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
So follow up on that a little bit. Is there, I am old enough to, I went to Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout, which I'm contractually to mention at least 15 minutes into every conversation I have with people. But when I was growing up, you know, it was the Boy Scouts, it was to some degree the NRA, which was a different organization back then, but they kind of normalized owning guns. At a point, I was growing up in the 70s and 80s in the New York metro area. There's not a huge gun culture there, but you know, I grew up in Middletown, New Jersey, if there's anybody from there out there, but one of the junior high schools had a shooting range in the basement. That's where we would go to shoot, because it was built in the early 60s and it was just routine. You know, there was a robust gun culture in America, and kids would go to ROTC and things like that, and they would learn how to shoot literally in school, which just seems like it's a different planet. But what are the organizations now, or are there? Because there's the political aspect, and I take very seriously what Dudley and I think Cody believe, that it's not about public opinion as much as it's about buttonholing the right people who, you know, who kind of control the pressure points of our legal and political system. But where are young people learning how to, you know, kind of, you know, get into an interesting and thoughtful and responsible gun culture?
I find it a lot in churches. Honestly, I see it in churches all around the country. Any place I go and talk to people who are involved in a church, they usually say our church shoots together, and because you get kind of like-minded people there. I know I do a lot of instruction with youth. I know we support, if you all know Top Shot Dustin, he's a big YouTuber. Yeah, Dustin's a real, he's a real humble character out in East Texas, and he actually has a marksmanship camp where kids come there and learn character, and they shoot all kinds of, and throw axes and do things, and he's a shooting monkey. I know, Mike, you shot around him a lot.
Yeah, he's great.
He's crazy good.
Yeah, he's really good.
Yeah, and
but are there,
that's
one function, are there large-scale organizations, you know, civic organizations that are promoting this?
Well, I mean, I think it's a little bit different than that today. I think it's entered into a new era. It's something that people are learning online. I mean, we're sitting up here with somebody who is influencing the culture directly every day through videos. We've gotten to a point where it's cool to own nods, right? Like, it's cool to have an SBR. People are pissed off that they have to have a tax stamp to have a rifle barrel that's half an inch shorter than something else, because it's offensive. They should be pissed off.
Yeah.
And we're at a point where culture is shifting, right? So Breitbart famously says, right, that politics is downstream of culture. Well, the courts are downstream of politics, and where we're seeing a lot of wins right now is in courtrooms, right? We've defeated every ATF rule that has come out in the last 10 years. The bump stock rule has been enjoined. The framer-receiver rule, which is aimed at stopping people from being able to manufacture their own firearms, we defeated that in a district court.
Let's go, dude.
Pistol braces, this nonsensical rule that ATF came out with that says that magically, all of a sudden, this thing that we've all agreed is legal for the past 10 years is now no longer legal. By the way, you've been a felon the whole time, despite what we said. People are fed up, and people are looking to YouTube, people are looking to Twitter, people are looking to different voices in the community to stand up and just say, look, enough is enough. I'm tired of federal government overreach. I'm tired of the ATF telling me what to do. Like, just leave, get out of my life, disband yourself. You do more harm than good.
Cody's right, though. Cody's right. Frankly, T-Rex and Lucas Botkin and Military Arms Channel, and that is where many people in our culture now take their cues on how to shoot. It's gone from the Boy Scout and 4-H days, which still exist, but not in great numbers. It's all happening on YouTube, frankly.
So that's an important thing for political and social change. I realize that you and I may just be having this conversation privately, but the old groups that, what used to be called the funny hat groups, the Elks and, things like that, including the Boy Scouts, they're cresting, they're fading, and new forms of social organization are coming up. One of Yao's major focuses is on pushing constitutional carry.
Yeah, let's go.
One thing that is impressive is the number of states that have adopted either in full or mostly, and I know you guys will nitpick every deviation from a full, maximal embrace of constitutional carry, but constitutional carry is doing extremely well, and it seems to be going up. And I'd like to go to Patrick first. What are the arguments and the campaigns that, in your experience, how did you, what were the arguments that worked to get people to say? Because this, again, if you're over 50, the idea of constitutional carry, that is something that Ronald Reagan would have kind of, soiled his pants over. In fact, as governor of California, he put in many restrictions on gun rights precisely because the wrong people were carrying guns around, right? So can you talk a little bit about what were the arguments for you that made things happen?
I think our movement, sometimes we try to get too intellectual and academic, and really you got to speak to the heart. And so I take a look at it. There's no reason that my wife should have to apply and get a permit and ask permission from the government to defend herself from a rapist. That's... You really got to get to the heart of the issue. We've talked about how in Colorado it's a coat tax because you can conceal and carry, or you can open carry in Colorado all day long, but the minute you put a coat over it, then you've got to go apply for this permit. But I think that's what truly moves the needle when you actually speak to people and the general public and politicians, is really getting to the heart and showing your passion for the issue. Because, like I said, politicians are scared of passionate activists like you.
Cody, can I ask you a question, and then I'm going to come back to you for a second. But in terms of the constitutional carry, the legal issues, what are the winning legal arguments for you?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we've kind of reversed the way that we look at the Constitution, right? People think about all these things. When you're talking at a federal level, people think about, what is the federal government, able to do? What powers does it have? But in reality, when you look at the Constitution, you need to look at how it was created. It's a system that gives the government very specific, limited powers. Now, the Second Amendment is important because it's a blatant statement of the fact that there is an underlying natural right to self-defense. But if you look to the Constitution, there's nowhere in there that gives the federal government any power to regulate arms, with one exception. they are able to arm the militias. So Congress could probably pass a law that armed every individual upon reaching the age of majority and just like handed out ARs. I thought that would be popular in this room. That's probably constitutional, so the day that that case comes up before the court is probably the day that I'll retire.
Could you do a quick issue that, until about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, the feds or the federal courts kind of stayed out of gun issues. This was being done at the state level. Excuse me, in state courts, were there particular legal arguments that really, flipped the script on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing there is, so you have this landmark opinion in Heller in 2008, right, that where the Supreme Court finally recognized that there's an underlying individual right. And then in 2010, you have this case in McDonald where the Supreme Court basically said, everything that we said in Heller applies to the states. It's called incorporation. It's a fancy legal doctrine. Basically, it just means that it applies against the states. And as soon as that happened in McDonald, you get this shift where federal courts are the appropriate venue to be fighting these cases, because what happens is you can have such a big and broad impact, right? If a case goes up to the Supreme Court like Bruin did last year, that had a massive nationwide impact because it was the appropriate interpretation of the law. We were finally returning to a constitutional form of government in some sense. We're kind of going back. And so federal courts have become this venue where people are tired of going into state court because they're tired of the courts not recognizing their rights and not vindicating their rights, which has been a problem in state courts.
Is that a high-stakes gamble? Because if the Supreme Court, if it rules the wrong way, right, then that's a lot of work to fix.
In a sense. I mean, there is certainly risk involved, but that's what's really important about being strategic. And what's really important about, so what FPC does is we make sure that we have a strategic mindset in all of our litigation. And we look at courtrooms across the country, we look at issues across the country, and we make sure that we are holding the final goal above all. And it's about ensuring that different courts are hearing different issues and that these issues are going up at the right time and that things are spread across the country in different ways. And so there are certainly risks involved. There's ways to mitigate that risk, and what we've seen in the last year is unprecedented victory across the country.
Dudley, you started out by saying, voters don't matter or public opinion doesn't matter. What is so is it really putting the squeeze on legislators, in terms of changing the laws? And what is the role of voters then, or activists, to push legislators to be better on gun rights?
Well, Nick, there are a number of people in this room, some of whom work for YAL, used to work for my organization. There are some legislators here in the room, I know for a fact, who have been our bill sponsors in states. I know one of our Louisiana legislators in the room. He had the guts to stand up and fight with his party, literally fight with his whole party in Louisiana and push the bill, and the governor keeps vetoing it. He doesn't care. He's a knucklehead like that. He's willing to fight. And he's backed up by activists who will push him, help him get reelected, help him get new blood in there. That's the only way. You've got to count votes to pass bills. Now, I detest the fact that we actually have to ask government for any of this crap. I became an activist because I cared that much about guns. But you do have to get rid of those laws so that we're not in fear of prosecution. I love the fact that FPC is out there strangling them in the courts and all across the country. We joined with them with our foundation and started going in areas that we could file that we didn't have suits, that you guys hadn't done it. Great. We're all kind of encompassing the whole country. But it's really putting pressure on politicians to say, you either vote for this or you pay me with your job. You're gone. Yeah.
Before we go on to the next topic, I want to come to Mike real quick. You kind of articulated this before, and if anybody on the panel has a different answer, let me know. Are there any legal or constitutionally valid infringements on gun ownership? Or what are they?
This one's for me?
Yeah, this one's for you.
I don't know legal stuff, man. I'm just here to change the culture.
Okay. Well, I guess that, this is because this is part of the rhetoric of gun rights, right? I mean, are there people who should not be allowed categorically to own guns in America?
People in jail?
Well, people in jail, yeah. But is there, I'm asking, is
I mean, you have to look, the Supreme Court says that when you're interpreting the Constitution, this is a normal principle, that you have to look to text as informed by history. There's only two kind of categories, maybe three kind of categories of people who were disarmed during the founding era. Most of those were blatantly racist or discriminatory. So slaves were disarmed, freedmen were disarmed, Native American tribes were disarmed, Catholics were disarmed. They were really, hey, it wasn't me.
It's true. I was born in Brooklyn, and Italians were barred effectively by early New York City gun control laws in the early part of the 20th
Yeah,
century.
so they're just blatantly discriminatory.
So those people, of course, Italians shouldn't be allowed to own guns.
Yeah.
If we give those people,
They're going to listen to those laws. New York Catholics,
this
Italians.
was the argument, which is also another powerful thing. If you guys are looking for conversations to have with people when you're on campus or you're going door to door, if you read the history of gun control, it is blatantly racist.
Horribly racist.
Anti-ethnic, anti-Catholic, all sorts of things. Reason Magazine, Google the racist roots of gun control, and you'll find a bunch of stories about that, which is good conversation.
But this is what they're pointing to, right?
Question, though, like, should people who, should felons be categorically, disarmed? Should mentally ill people of some sort or not?
You pass a bad check, and you should never be able to protect yourself?
And this is the problem, right? Is so the way that the felon disarmament statute works is that it actually prohibits anybody who's been convicted of a crime punishable by more than 1 year's imprisonment. That doesn't mean that you had to serve 1 year in prison. That doesn't mean that that the crime that you did was actually a violent crime. There is case after case of people being disarmed for illegally importing cassette tapes in 1987. He's disarmed for life. People in this room probably don't even know what a cassette tape is anymore. Like, that was in 1987. The most offensive one, though, is somebody has been disarmed for lying on their taxes, and the court said, well, she obviously deprived the government of the property that it was due. So the problem is we're not actually talking about laws that are targeting actual dangerous people that are using guns in the commission of crime. People are being disarmed for misdemeanors. People are being disarmed for writing bad checks. People are being disarmed because they smoke a plant in their free time. People are being disarmed for all sorts of things across this country, and we're not focusing on actual dangerous people.
What about veterans? So veterans were disarmed under both Republican and Democrat administrations because they had PTSD. You really want to tell veterans that come home from combat and in Fallujah and tell them the freedoms they were fighting to protect, they can't exercise? That seems like a recipe for disaster. And then you tell them, don't go get counseling because if you do, you'll lose your rights. What kind of insanity is that? It's not. Yeah,
So
exactly.
let me, I want to shift now because, Yale's focus is on, going door to door, getting the vote out, putting pressure on voters, or not putting pressure, convincing voters, of certain kind of policies or energizing about that, who then hold legislators accountable. I want to ask about how do we expand the pool of people who are in favor of gun rights. And so, according to a study published last year by the National Library of Medicine, men own guns at about twice the rate of women, and women, like men and women who own guns, they have the same attitudes towards gun control. They overwhelmingly want fewer gun restrictions, which kind of makes sense. If you're a gun owner, you understand what you're doing, and you think more people should have more, ability to possess and carry guns, under whatever circumstances. But women, it's about a 2-to-1 difference. Women are more likely as a group to be in favor of stricter gun control. What are the arguments that might be advanced to get more women to say, like owning guns is a good idea. Mike, do you want
Yeah, so this is something that I'm really passionate about, right? Because what are the chances of me walking down the street, or chances are probably pretty low that I'm going to walk down the street and somebody's either going to assault me or try to rape me. That's a pretty low chance. Now, the chance of that happening to women, unfortunately, are probably much higher. Women should be carrying at a much higher rate than men. I want people to fear that type of shit. Yeah. Sorry, excuse my language. That's
Put another
true.
quarter in. Keep going.
No, you're good. And so they should be carrying at a far greater rate. And like, why is so much sexual assault? Why is so much of this occurring? I mean, we can get into it. We have an amoral, we have a fatherless society, and those are issues that we should be tackling. Those are issues that lead to all this gun violence, but we never talk about that. And it's ridiculous, you know?
Yeah, and I think it starts at the family too. Like for me, like specifically, I've got a wife and 3 daughters. And when I was first marrying my wife and we were like first dating, like her dad had owned guns, but it always was like a guy thing to do, and the guys would just go hunting and never made about it. Well, I'll tell you, all my 3 daughters have shot, and I've taught them to shoot, and it's like really the fatherly responsibility to, because guns are the great equalizer.
There you go.
And I want people to fear my daughter. Like if someone's going to assault one of my daughters or my wife, I want them to be able to fear them.
That's right.
If I may, kind of in an analogous situation, you know, there's a split between kind of rural and urban voters, but also between blacks and whites along similar lines. And again, it's more regional, or it's like where you live more than, you know, what gender you are, what race you are. But I've always been impressed by the fact that there's a number of high-profile, you know, actors or hip-hop artists, people like Ice Cube and Ice-T, people like Killer Mike, if you know these guys, who are, on some level, they seem to be kind of standard issue progressive liberals. And every time I've seen this again and again where they get into conversations about gun rights, because whoever's talking to them is always like, well, you want universal health care, so you must be in favor of getting rid of all guns. And they're like, no way, do not touch my guns. What are the strategies to reach out to other groups that are not, you know, represented as fully in this room as they might be if we want to have a massive clean sweep of maximal gun rights? How do you talk to blacks? How do you talk to Latinos? How do you talk to people who generally seem to be voting in favor of guns?
Yeah, it's the people in their own communities. Coley Noir is a great channel. You know, a lot of the female gun tubers are really speak to women in many ways. But I would remind everybody that during the summer of 2020, which we all remember that, how ugly that was. Yeah, it was. But I went to gun shops and I would see like Priuses with Bernie stickers on the back at gun shops buying guns. The weird part about, and all those people became gun owners for the first time. You talk to gun shop owners, there was massive number of people, leftist people. My lesbian neighbor next door literally told me she wanted to buy a gun and I needed to help her with training because she was worried about the Trump people attacking her. I'm like, what? But I'm telling you that those people, it doesn't change how they vote, unfortunately. They're still going to vote for the commies, and especially my state, and they're still going to push that. So them possessing a firearm actually probably didn't change anything in the political sense.
I will point out too, Bernie Sanders, and I realize the NRA is, you know, not the organization that once we thought it was, but he had a fantastic approval rating. It might even have been 100%.
So did Harry Reid.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, but
so
they also, you know, it's a weird thing once you get outside of the coast, really. Gun rights are, you know, much more, everybody believes in them a little bit, right?
Right.
So it's interesting.
Right.
Well, let's, in the time we have left, what I would like to ask you guys to address is how do you take the gun rights issue, which is overall, I mean, there's problems, but overall is doing extremely well. It's a focus of YAL. How do you tie gun rights into other issues that are related to, you know, a kind of libertarian polity where people are given maximal individual liberty to live the way that they want to? How do you either go from, you know, let's reduce taxes to, you know, to let's reduce gun laws, or how do you go from how do we reduce gun laws to how do we reduce taxes?
The government should fear the people.
Say that?
I said the government should fear the people.
This is where it's important that we talk about what the Second Amendment is really about, right? It's not about stopping home intruders. It's an important function. But right, the Second Amendment was drafted and was ratified and was so important to protect against tyranny. Not to stop criminals, good, important, but to stop those criminals that are sitting in legislatures across the country or are sitting in Washington, D.C. The point of the Second Amendment is to ensure that we can have our other protections and to ensure that an armed populace will be able to protect against tyranny. If you read the Declaration of Independence, they looked to the right of revolution. It's not hidden, it's in the document. We just need to read it, and we need to understand that the important underlying right is ours, and that those rights, all of them, whether it's speech, whether it's to be free from unfair taxation, whether it's the ability to defend your life, those are your rights. Those aren't the government's. And we have specifically created a system to stop the government from infringing on those rights. And this generation and people up and coming now are starting to have that conversation. You're starting to think about rights that way. You're starting to think about it and look at it in a way of, hold on, where did they get the power to do this? And as soon as we shift that mindset, then that's when everything changes.
Well put.
Can I ask you, in your legislative experience, were you, I mean, was it true that people who were in favor of reducing gun laws were also in favor of reducing taxes, regulation? I mean, is there a general kind of, set of issues that work together? It's kind of like Microsoft Office, except it works, where things are integrated. Was that the case, or did you find that some people were just into this one issue or this issue or that issue?
Unfortunately, no, it wasn't all the case. Like, I can actually think of a specific example in Colorado where we had the sheriff that got really famous. He actually used the red flag law in Colorado, saying, if I will never do this and I will go to my own jail if they put me in my own jail because I refuse to enforce the red flag law. But then you turn around, the red flag law, and he would actually endorse and go against when we tried repealing civil asset forfeiture, which is the same thing as red flag, but for all your property. Yeah. And so unfortunately, these guys, sometimes politicians, you got to be careful because they know the Second Amendment issue is popular with their base. They'll push it, but then they get wrong on all sorts of other liberty issues. And so you got to keep a watchful eye on your politicians.
Yeah. Link them together. Linking liberty issues together is not that difficult because, especially the First Amendment, because the only way we protect our gun rights right now is with First Amendment. That's how we do it. It's why our organization is very happy to file lawsuits on First Amendment issues, because that's how we actually advance our rights on the Second Amendment. Yeah. And that applies for every issue we're fighting on. We need the First Amendment, the most important, to really be sacrosanct.
Yeah. Okay, well, we are about out of time. I want to give a big hand, or I want you to give a big hand to Dudley Brown, Patrick Neville, Garand Thumb, a.k.a. Mike Jones, and Cody Wisniewski.
Fun.
For all of you who will be, and many of you will be doing this as you go out into the world and multiply and rise up in activism, this is the cheapest but most effective way to end any talk. It's like, and you know what? Give a big hand to yourselves. You're the greatest, most beautiful, sweet-smelling audience out here. Go out, get activated, and talk to the people that you're trying to convince. Understand where they're coming from. Link gun rights to all the other rights, and keep coming back. So thank you very much.